All right, everyone, welcome back to another Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes video with Fat Phil. And are you ready for Bo-Katan? Because guess what? She's coming back already. I want to talk about this. I want to talk about why I think she's coming back already. And I think the problem that characters like her are presenting to the Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes player base. So like, subscribe, comment down below, let me know your thoughts. Let's give a huge shout out to the channel members for their continued support. Again, if you're ever interested, that link is down below. Anytime I'm live streaming, these guys get priority for roster reviews. There's a special section of the Discord where they get to ask, questions kind of directly, like especially when it's like a, hey, Phil, what's better, this or this? So very much appreciate all you. And of course, to those of you on the council, like I'm blown away at how many there are of you right now. I cannot thank you guys enough for putting your faith in me. I know some of you got these gifted, but that's perfectly okay, right? You're all still on the council. So thank your sponsor. Thank you guys for, continuing to put your trust in me. And I hope you guys enjoy this video. So let's talk about the monetization in Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes. Now, what sparked this for me is that the Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes events server said, hey, Bo-Katan is coming back. And you look at the last event. Look at this. This is absurd. The last event was January 21st, and now February 10th, she's coming again. This isn't even 3 weeks later. Like, we have not gotten Cal this many times, and yet we're going to be getting Bo-Katan again. I'm not a fan of this at all. I think that this is a very bad look for the developers, because I think, and I'm going to explain why I think it's such a bad look. That there's, the reason I think this is such a bad look is because of the amount of players who actually have Bo-Katan Mandalore. So we're going to switch over to the screen capture here. And this is, again, Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes.gg. So you can go on this tab and you can click on, like, Relic Player Data. And when we zoom in here, what you see is that the least relic character is Darth Bane because no one has him. But then Jedi Knight Guardian and then Bo-Katan Mandalore coming in technically second to last place. That's absurd. So you're talking about a small subset of the player base who actually has this character. Like, that blows my mind. Look, there's only 2,400 people who have a relic IG-12 and Grogu. So 600 more people can potentially get, Bo-Katan. Like that, it's just, this is a bad look. This is not the time to be re-releasing her. Not when Jedi Knight Cal Kestis, where's Jedi Knight Cal Kestis at? I know he's got to be around here somewhere. There he is. There's 16,000 of him in the game. There are probably far more players who are ready for another Jedi Knight Cal Kestis than there are players who are ready for Bo-Katan Mandalore. And I feel like this is a step in the wrong direction for Capital Games, where I feel like they've done a really good job of trying to release some things to help a lot of the players in the game, right? Like with the Lightspeed bundles. And it just seems like Bo-Katan has kind of been like thrown out there and just like, hey, whale food, whale food, whale food. And to those of you who spend the money, right, we salute you, right? On this channel, we support whales. I want to make that very clear. But I think whales sometimes is a bad way to describe them because they're more like sharks, right? So the top end of the player base, they're like the sharks. And then you know how there's those little fish that swim underneath the sharks that like they pick off the parasites from the shark, right? That without that little fish, the shark would die. The little fish is free to play, right? As a free to play, you're there to, hey, I'm going to make sure that the shark stays alive and stays happy, because if the shark goes away, other predators are going to get me. And, the sharks have to sit there and recognize that if that little fish isn't protected and, doesn't stick around, I'm toast. So this over monetization of Bo-Katan and like these, I'd say the new release characters is hitting some really, really bad and I think painful parts to the game of players having to make these decisions that I can't keep spending money like this. And so I got me thinking about like the monetization model in Galaxy of Heroes. And I feel like it's always been this concept of like the vast majority of it is I'd rather ask 100, I'd rather ask one person for $100 than 100 people for $1. That I feel like that has always been Capital Games mindset. And again, I know that's an extreme example, but like that's always been my concept with them, is that they'd rather focus on a small group of people to give them a lot of money than a large group of people, to give them smaller amounts, and that it adds up. And I think maybe, and I was hoping they would have seen that with the Lightspeed bundles, where that was probably one of the most purchased packs, and that they made probably a crazy amount of money on those Lightspeed bundles compared to some other things, right? Now, again, I don't know the math. I don't know at what point it's more profitable than a marquee and not. Like, I don't know that math. I'm not smart enough. Someone else can figure that out for me. But, I think I'd be interested to see that. So it got me thinking about, other ways that they monetize characters, right? So you think of like the comeuppance and other stuff, right? Like these all drive the Datacrons, which Datacrons I think is a big part of the monetization right now. And I think that is very well shown by the fact that the two sets right now, this is another thing, right? The sets right now, like your major characters here are from this set were Corzlite Leia and Dr. Aphra, right? Those were the two big Datacrons that everybody wanted here. And then in this new set, the two big ones are Dark Trooper Gideon and Bo-Katan Mandalore, right? Those are the two like biggest ones, the flashiest. Beskar Armor Mando got a good Datacron, but he's not, it's not Bo-Katan's. So here's my issue, my problem. You think of those characters right now. Now Jabba, I think is far more, the Corzlite Leia Cron, I feel a lot more players will be able to have that. But you think Bo-Katan, Dark Trooper Gideon, and Dr. Aphra are all characters who are far less available. Especially Bo-Katan and Gideon, right? Like most of the player base doesn't have them. So you're trying to monetize Datacrons who most players don't really like already. And then the characters who are getting the biggest benefits from them are only in another small subset. So like you're squeezing the top end of the player base more and more. And I think Bo-Katan is kind of showing them that they need to start squeezing other places, right? You need to start trying to figure out how to get the middle, players who aren't at that tip of the spear to also spend. So I had a couple thoughts in mind of how to not only make changes to the game that are beneficial, because anytime Capital Games adds monetization, it needs to add value to everyone, right? Or it needs to add value to the player base. And I've talked about it all the time with Zetas, that I get that the guys in Arnold's guild and, Zareth's guilds, like they don't need Zetas. But how many of you would buy Zeta packs right now? A lot of you would, I bet, right? I bet a lot of you sitting there with your Lightspeed bundles would love to get more Zetas right now. And there was a Grand Arena opponent I had last season. I forget his name, but very nice guy. We were chatting a little bit, and I was like, dude, I was really impressed with your roster, but like, I was surprised how few Zetas you had. And he goes, they're actually the only thing I can't buy. And it was like this moment of, wow, that's actually a really good point. And I think I might have told that story, so I apologize, but I forget things. I was like, wow, you know what? Like, that's a very good point, that a lot of these new guys who are coming in who want to be spending money in the game get sidetracked thinking like, I can't whale on Zetas, so is it even worth me getting this character? And like, in many ways you could say maybe not, right? So I think Zetas would be another way. But another big one, and this is probably where a lot of you hopefully agree here, is Conquest. Now, the Conquest passes, everybody knows, and they're like, oh, Phil, we don't need more Conquest passes. Like, I hate the Conquest pass. No one buys it. But, there's the Conquest passes, right? So you can get your Conquest passes, right? The premium reward track or the $30 pass. But this is the only way they monetize Conquest. When you sit there and truly think about it, this is really their only form of revenue from this game mode. Because everyone else just uses their free-to-play crystals to try to get through this most of the time, right? So if you're not buying the Conquest passes, this isn't generating as much revenue as they want. I have a solution that I think could really help. Selling data discs. How many of you have watched a content creator, like I'm just about to show you this one right here, Disruptive Reactions. How many of you have watched a content creator and they're like, this is how you cheese this feat, but you need to have XYZ data discs, and then you don't have a single one of those. So now you can't do that feat, right? Like this Disruptive Reactions, just take a look at this. I got this in Sector 1 last Conquest, and then this one I got it in Sector 5, but I still get this. Whenever an enemy takes a turn on, random ally gains 100% turn meter. This is probably the most broken data disc I've ever used in Conquest. Like, I mean, deployable cooldown systems was also, like, crazy, but you think that was reliant on you still taking a turn. Like, you cannot get turn meter trained by this data, like, when you have this data disc, unless you're going up against a Hux team, or the first ability that the enemy uses dazes your entire team. They cannot run a turn meter loop on you. You will take a turn immediately after their first one. It's amazing. But how many of you would benefit from this disc? How many of you would buy this, whether it's with crystals or, some of you maybe even money, but like, imagine they sold this for, like 2,000 crystals. Would you buy it? I think there's players who would buy that for 2,000 crystals. What if they sold Voluntary Vanguard for like 500 crystals? How many players would buy that? I think you could really improve the monetization for players throughout the entire level of this game by offering. Now, let me be clear. I'm not saying you take them out of the nodes there are. You keep the nodes the same, right? That you don't solely put these in a store. I should have said that earlier. Like, you're not solely putting these in a store. But what you do is you keep, the data disks as they are, right? That we're going to keep these here, and you've got to work your way through and find, your data disks, right? But then, let's say I don't get what I want out of those. Put them in, like, the Conquest store and sell them for a certain number of crystals based on how rare they are, right? I think that would be fantastic. That would drive that. I guarantee you there would be players at both the top end of the game and the bottom end of the game who would go in there, buy their data disks right away because they want to get through Conquest and not have to think about, do I get Voluntary Vanguard? Do I get Disruptive Protection, reactions, or Amplify Agonies, right? Like, I think by doing this, by putting these in a store that, hey, I didn't get the ones that I wanted on my nodes, I can go purchase them, would drive so much more revenue for this game. I would bet my bottom dollar on that. And you could do it even for crystals. Because when you think about it, just take a step back, right? When you say, Phil, like, how many crystals would they make it? If they made it 2,000 crystals, just 2,000 crystals, even for those, like, purple data disks, you have to think about that 2,000 crystals, right? That's over $10 worth of crystals to them. That if you were to go buy those, that's over $10 worth of crystals. So it's not cheap to do that. So that's why I think it'd be such a good thing, because a lot of players would be like, oh, 2,000 doesn't sound that bad. But like for me, I'd be out of crystals if I went and purchased that. So I think that would be a really good way to improve revenue and give players access to things. Like it helps everyone, right? I really think that fixing monetization could start there. That keep Conquest exactly as it is. Just add a way to purchase data disks. That if I don't get the ones that I want, allow me to go into a store and purchase them for crystals, and I think you would see revenue pick up, and I think you would see this Bo-Katan stuff, like that you wouldn't have to rely on, the top 0.1% to generate all your revenue by spending on Bo-Katan, that you could offset that and say, hey, maybe we're going to do this, right? And now you're getting revenue from another source, and that you can implement things slower and get, increase that revenue. That I think they need to look into avenues like this, where it's not like Conquest is, I feel like, a game where it's not, there's almost not enough ways to whale in it, right? Like you can do a couple of things, like, and then the consumables, like, don't even get me started on these. It is so ridiculous. These are so ridiculous. Like, that's another thing. If you want players to, like, actually spend money on these, like, how many of you are going to buy this overcharged evasion booster for one battle and pay 75 crystals? Like, no way, right? Like, that's one battle? No way. For 75 crystals? That's ridiculous. I could do an energy refresh for 50 and get 6 battles worth and hope for good RNG to beat that team. You know what I mean? Like, that's absurd. This is obscene. But what if instead they said, hey, you know what? If you buy this in Sector 1, right, you get to use this in all of Sector 1. Or for 75 crystals, you can use this in 5 battles or 6 battles, right? I don't know. But, like, allow us to use these for more, and I think players would purchase them. It's just, they're so expensive for such little value. Like, it's one friggin' battle. Like, I feel like they over monetize new characters and the marquees and these capital ships, and then you've got this game mode like Conquest that half the player base doesn't like because they feel like it's so grindy and it takes so long, and it's completely reliant on getting good data disks at times. Where, hey, what if you're that player who, I really like Conquest, or I'd want to do good, but I can't get Voluntary Vanguard, so there's no reason for me to try. Hey, I could go to this store and maybe get some things to help me out. Like, I'm just thinking, guys, you tell me if you hate this idea and you're like, Phil, I don't want more ways to have to spend money. Because I think by adding this data disk store, you don't, and I'll say this, right? To CG, if you're watching this, I doubt it, but if you're watching it, don't take this as only certain things will be in this store. I think that would be you would lose players with that. But I think you say, hey, those purple data disks that other players don't see, there's an option to buy them, because I think like that's where I think you need to be understanding. Like everything still has, keep it everything exactly the same. Just put these things inside of a store, and I think you would increase revenue. And I think that would solve this Bo-Katan issue you're seeing where players aren't wailing on her because they feel like they're so squeezed dry from other areas. And honestly, like, where's Jedi Knight Cal? At the end of the day, so if you're still watching right now, where is Jedi Knight Cal in the comments? That's what I want to see. Let me know your thoughts on this, guys. I feel pretty passionate about this. I feel like this is a great idea. I feel like they could friggin' hire me for all they want. But yeah, like, subscribe, comment. I love all you. May the force be with you, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers, guys.